was Jesus teaching after seeing a widow give all that she had to the treasury of the temple? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Mark on Walking Through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Mark chapter 12. We're going to be reading from verses 41 to 44. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Mark chapter 12, beginning at verse 41. Now Jesus sat opposite the treasury and saw how the people put money into the treasury, and many who were rich put in much. Then one poor widow came and threw in 2 mites, which make a quadrans. So he called his disciples to himself and said to them, Assuredly I say to you that this poor widow has put in more than all those who have given to the treasury. For they all put in out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty put in all that she had, her whole livelihood. It is still Tuesday on the final week of Jesus' ministry. In fact, as far as we know, this was the final public day of Jesus' ministry, with the events of Wednesday and most of Thursday largely unknown. Jesus has spent the day in Jerusalem, in the temple, teaching and answering questions posed by the Pharisees, Sadducees, and scribes. In the last episode, he taught them an important point about the Messiah, in that he would be God as well as man. What we read of today likely occurred near the close of the day, and it is a story that was not covered in our study of Matthew. In verse 41, Mark tells us that Jesus was sitting opposite the treasury, watching how people put their money into the treasury. In many churches today, a collection plate is passed around for people to give into the treasury of the church, but to assume that that is the only acceptable way would be wrong. In the temple, they used a box, and so as long as giving is properly done according to the will of God, the where we place our money is largely left up to us. What Jesus witnessed is that when the rich came, they put in much into the treasury for the temple. This would be expected, for the rich have plenty of money with which to give. However, Jesus also witnessed a widow who came and threw in 2 mites. A mite was a small copper coin, which would be worth a fraction of a penny. In other words, the value of what she put in was very small. If we were asked who gave more into the treasury, almost certainly people would say that the rich gave more because of the sheer amount of money that was greater than that of the widow. That was not what Jesus said, though, for he said that the widow gave more. For the rich put in out of their abundance, but the widow put in out of her poverty. In fact, she put in all that she had. That was quite the sacrifice for the widow, but it showed how much she valued the work of the temple and how much she trusted in God to provide for her needs. Now, when people read this story, they can sometimes come away with the wrong impressions about what Jesus is teaching here. First of all, he was not teaching that God expects everybody to give him all of their money. Nowhere in the New Testament do you find such a command. This widow chose to give all that she had. It was her attitude that Jesus was commending, not the fact that she put in everything. Jesus also wasn't teaching that it doesn't matter what you give. New Testament giving is to be according to how we've been prospered. Some might give more than they've been prospered, but we shouldn't be giving less than we've been prospered. Our heart needs to be in the right place, and we must value the work that the church is given to do and want to be a part of that work. Jesus isn't teaching that the rich people cannot please God. In witnessing the rich people give here, the passage doesn't tell us that Jesus was chastising the rich for how much they gave. Mark does tell us that they gave a lot. He is just making the comment that the widow gave more because of what little she had. And percentage-wise, the comparison is correct. Rich people can obey God, and when they do, God will be pleased. And finally, Jesus isn't teaching that poor people are acceptable to God in whatever they do. If this widow would have put in all that she had in order to be praised by men, then she would have had the wrong attitude and wouldn't have been praised by Jesus. She gave for the right reasons and thus was commended. So if Jesus wasn't teaching those lessons, what was he teaching? First things first, Jesus is teaching that God takes our ability into account when we give. Again, we're to give as we've been prospered. God doesn't expect the impossible, but he does expect that we do what we are able to do. Jesus is teaching that our giving is not to be done to be seen of men. That doesn't mean that nobody can witness that we give, but that isn't to be the purpose of our giving. We're to give with a cheerful heart to God. Jesus is teaching that our sacrifice is shown by what we have left, not by how much we have given. A sacrifice isn't really a sacrifice if we really don't notice anything is missing. The widow sacrificed much, while in comparison the rich sacrificed little. That lesson should really get us to consider our giving and give accordingly. And finally, Jesus is teaching that God knows everything about us. The widow didn't come and announce that she was giving all that she had, but Jesus, as God, knew that she did. God knows all. Nothing is hidden from him. So let us act in a way that brings glory to God. With that, our time is up today. Lord, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Mark chapter 13, verses 1 to 13, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.